Tonight, we'll be diving deep into one of the most infamous true crime cases in the world. Except this time, we're digging into details that were overshadowed by a rushed investigation, as well as new details about the man convicted of her murder. Hi, I'm Katie, and welcome to Night Watch. If you're into true crime, real-time courtroom drama, and late-night deep dives, you're in the right place. Subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on Spotify. We have new episodes every weeknight.
The future of American student Amanda Knox now rests in the hands of an Italian jury.
Now, Italian prosecutors are wrapping up their case in the murder trial of Amanda Knox, the American college student accused of brutally stabbing her roommate while studying abroad.
It was a stunning verdict in what's been called Italy's trial of the century. And for 22-year-old Amanda Knox and her family from Seattle, it was a devastating loss.
This episode discusses active criminal cases and breaking news. The information we share is based on what's publicly available at the time of recording and may change as new evidence comes to light. We aim to inform, not to decide guilt or innocence. So everyone mentioned is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Tonight, we'll be covering the case of Meredith Kercher itself, as well as new developments related to the man convicted of Meredith's murder, who for the most part escaped the brunt of media attention. Much of the media coverage on this case hasn't actually focused on Meredith, though, but rather her roommate at the time, Amanda Knox. Amanda was accused of being a sexually deviant mastermind who killed her roommate during an orgy, and because of that, Amanda's name is the one people tend to remember in this case. Her story has attracted a lot of public attention, including multiple documentaries and a scripted series from Hulu that came out this August. In 2009, Amanda and the guy she was dating at the time of the crime, Raffaele Sollecito, were found guilty of being accomplices to Meredith's murder. However, 2 years later, the lead investigator in Meredith's murder case came under fire for his conduct in another case, which ultimately sent Amanda and Raffaele back to court. And in 2015, their convictions were finally overturned. But there was a third suspect who dodged most of the media attention, despite a guilty verdict and a plethora of incriminating evidence against him, which we'll get into later. He said he felt remorse, so the judge granted him a speedy trial, and public attention was refocused on Amanda and Raffaele. Until now. His name is Rudy Guede, and he was sentenced to 30 years in prison for Meredith's murder, but was let out after 16 years on good behavior. However, in 2023, his ex-girlfriend accused him of beating and raping her, and he was sent back to the courtroom in November of 2025. Today, we're going to dive into Meredith's case and why some people still think it's not fully solved. Let's start with Meredith herself, who's so often left out of her own story. Meredith was the baby of her family. She was born in England in 1985 to her parents, John and Arlene, and she had two older brothers, John Jr. and Lyle, as well as an older sister, Stephanie. Even though she was the youngest, Meredith's siblings always viewed her as witty, funny, outgoing, and smart. She was always up for the challenge, and growing up, she wanted to follow in her dad's footsteps and become a journalist. Meredith was fueled by a deep sense of curiosity and love of knowledge. So at age 15, she did a foreign exchange program and spent a summer with a family in southern Italy. She fell in love with the country and the culture, and when she was a junior at the University of Leeds, Meredith joined a study abroad program to go back to Italy. In the summer of 2007, when Meredith was 21 years old, she headed to Perugia, a small central city in Italy, which she thought would be safer than a big city like Rome. Meredith rented a house with 3 other women. 2 of them were Italian locals studying law, Filomena Romanelli and Laura Mazzetti. The other was a 20-year-old American foreign exchange student from Seattle named Amanda Knox. Amanda wanted to study linguistics, so studying abroad was the perfect opportunity for her. Her Italian skills were still pretty basic, but her roommates were helping her get better. Her and Meredith got along, although sometimes Meredith told her family back home about common small roommate squabbles over chores, cleanliness, visitors, and the fact that Amanda had a sex toy on display in their shared bathroom. But their disagreements weren't a huge problem for the two of them. They still hung out and went shopping and sightseeing together. In general, Meredith was loving Italy and even started dating a boy in the neighborhood. However, just a few short months into her adventure abroad, tragedy struck. On November 1st, 2007, Meredith's Italian roommates were both out of town, and Amanda was spending time with her new boyfriend, Raffaele, who she met just a few days earlier. Meanwhile, Meredith got dinner with some other friends, then went out on the town for a late Halloween celebration. But what transpired next has been the subject of debate for almost 20 years. None of Meredith's roommates came home that night. It wasn't until the next morning that Amanda returned home after spending the night at Raffaele's house. Everything was quiet, and Amanda immediately noticed some strange things. The front door was slightly ajar, and there was a speck of blood in the sink, but she didn't think much of it. So she took a shower, but then as she stepped onto the bath mat, she saw a few more drops of blood, but thought maybe someone had cut themselves shaving or maybe they got their period. But when she looked at the toilet, she realized someone had taken a dump without flushing it. And this seems weird, but the roommates had a conversation with Amanda about how the plumbing in Italy wasn't great and how she needed to use the toilet brush after using the bathroom. So she knew her roommates wouldn't have left that and immediately suspected someone else had been in their apartment. Amanda immediately went to Meredith's room to check on her, but the door was closed and locked. And when she tried calling Meredith, she didn't answer her phone. At this point, Amanda felt like something unusual had happened, but she didn't suspect anything serious. So she went back to Raffaele's house for a bit, but Meredith still wasn't answering her phone. Amanda was starting to get worried now, so she and Raffaele headed back to her apartment. When they got there, they could see from the outside that Filomena's window was completely shattered. Now, Amanda was scared that the house had been burglarized. She and Raffaele quickly called the police. The responding officers were postal police who handle communications-related crime. They'd been sent to the apartment because 2 cell phones had been found in a nearby garden. When they arrived, they refused to break down Meredith's door, so one of Filomena's friends kicked it down. And then the officers went in. Inside, they discovered a gruesome and tragic scene. Meredith was lying on her bed unresponsive, and there was blood all over her room. A blanket covered her partially naked body, and when police removed it, they discovered that she had been stabbed dozens of times and her throat was slit. Meredith Kercher was pronounced dead on the scene. Authorities now have a murder investigation on their hands. At the same time, even before the news formally broke, Meredith's dad, John Kercher, got wind of the story from his connections in the media. He heard horrifying rumors that a young British woman had been killed in Perugia. And since the town was relatively small, John wanted to make sure it was not his daughter, so he frantically called around to try and learn more. One of his sources told him that the victim's name was Meredith. And not long after, the Kercher family got the official call that is every family's worst nightmare. Their beloved daughter and sister had been murdered. I feel like it's so hard to decide on the perfect gift for each of my family members, and I always find myself getting a last-minute gift. If you're the same way, you've got to check out Aura Frames. My sister got our whole family Aura Frames for Christmas last year, and it has been such an amazing gift. The frame has a function where everyone can upload photos to a shared album, and it will show up on everyone's frame in the rotation of pictures. And since I'm a brand new auntie, it has been fun to be able to watch my nephew and niece grow up. I was just laughing with my sister-in-law when a picture of my nephew as a newborn came up, and she said, "It's funny because looking back on it, we thought he was so cute at the time, but now he looks like an alien." You can also preload photos before it ships, so they open it already filled with memories, and keep adding new ones anytime from anywhere. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling carver matte frames, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code CRIMEHOUSE at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code CRIMEHOUSE. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast. So order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. In November of 2007, 21-year-old Meredith Kercher was murdered while studying abroad in Italy. Her roommate, 20-year-old Amanda Knox, and Amanda's boyfriend, Raffaele Sollecito, had called the police when they suspected that a burglary had taken place the night before. As officers made the heart-wrenching discovery of what really happened and began processing the scene, Amanda still had no idea what was going on. She was standing outside the house watching as officers rushed in and out. They were speaking Italian, which Amanda only had a basic understanding of, which meant she still thought that the police were handling a robbery. It didn't occur to Amanda that her confusion in those moments would set off the darkest chapter in her life. Once Amanda and Raffaele were finally told the truth, they were both distraught, and Amanda did her best to cope with her shock when she was taken to the police station for questioning. However, officers quickly started judging some of Amanda's more unusual behavior. Amanda and Raffaele were being affectionate and making faces at each other. In his memoir, Raffaele says that Meredith's British friends seemed appalled by the affection Amanda showed to him at the station after hearing that her roommate had just been murdered. In her book, Amanda says, quote, "I suspect that Raffaele thought I was having a breakdown. He sat me in his lap and bounced me gently. He kissed me, made faces at me, and told me jokes, all in an effort to soothe my agitation." The second odd thing police noted was that Amanda was doing cartwheels and splits at the station. However, it's important to note that Amanda has said that despite their claims, she never did a cartwheel, but she did do the splits once, and added that she could have been more sensitive to the people around her. Another thing they pointed to was that when Amanda saw Meredith's friends at the police station after they learned about her death, one of them, Sophie Putnam, went to hug Amanda, but police said Amanda seemed cold towards her. In an interview about this, Amanda said, quote, "I think, again, that goes back to their reinterpretation of what I did or didn't do. When Sophie embraced me the first time, I was not ready. I went back to her and embraced her again when she was crying in a chair on her own in the hallway." Another thing that became one of the most scandalous photos in the trial was a picture of Amanda and Raffaele kissing outside of the crime scene. And lastly, the lead investigator said that when he took Amanda back to the crime scene and made her open the drawer to see if any knives were gone, she had a nervous breakdown and started to hit her ears with her palms. He claimed that this was a sign that she was reliving Meredith's screams and sealed the deal on his suspicion of her involvement. The police first called Raffaele in for an interview, and Amanda accompanied him to the police station as support. In an interview about his interrogation, Raffaele said that the investigator told him Amanda lied to him all the time, and that she was a cow, and that she didn't care about him. After the intense interrogation and being told these things about Amanda, Raffaele told the police that he wasn't sure if Amanda was with him the whole night. Police then pulled Amanda into the interrogation room and said that Raffaele had turned on her. And this interrogation is where things took a turn for the worse. Amanda and her roommates smoked weed often, and her roommates asked her to deny that there was any in the apartment because they could lose their internships if they were caught with any. Amanda went along with it, but there was a problem. The police had already found the weed, so they knew she was lying. Not only that, but her and Raffaele's stories about what they'd been up to the night before were disjointed and inconsistent. During their initial questioning, investigators began to suspect that Amanda and Raffaele hadn't actually simply found the scene that morning. They thought the young couple had something to do with Meredith's murder. And the lead investigator had created a narrative for what happened that shaped this case and the way Amanda was perceived forever. Investigators were informed that Amanda had a vibrator and had a few male visitors that painted the picture that she was sexually promiscuous. And with the investigators' religious convictions and worldview, a woman who owns a vibrator and brought more than one man back home must be a witch, a she-devil, a sexual deviant who convinced these men to join her in an orgy and kill her roommate. Headlines wrote that she was Lucifer-like, satanic, demonic, diabolical, a witch of deception. Despite having zero evidence that Amanda was a witch, or that she was even interested in group sex, the media ran with it and quickly became headline news. They sexualized Amanda to an alarming degree and formed a narrative that the three of them had sex the night Meredith died. But rather than give Amanda a lawyer or even a translator, investigators became extremely aggressive toward her. According to Amanda, they kept her at the station for the next 5 days and questioned her for a total of 53 hours. Throughout the course of their interviews, officers tried to get Amanda to confess to killing her roommate. And when that didn't work, they slapped her multiple times. They also deprived her of sleep to the point of delirium. Finally, once Amanda was too disoriented and confused to understand what was happening, detectives typed up a written confession that Amanda signed, in my opinion, after coercion, distress, and unethical interrogation tactics. The story outlined in the confession did not paint Amanda as Meredith's actual killer, but an accomplice. By now, police had found text messages between Amanda and her boss at a local bar where she worked, a man named Patrick Lumumba. In the text, Patrick told Amanda that she had the night off, and Amanda replied, "Okay, see you later." In America, this is a very loose term, but in Italy, see you later means you are actually going to meet up later. So this text alone was enough for detectives to determine that Patrick had actually gone to the woman's house that night. They claimed that Patrick carried out the crime while Amanda and Raffaele not only watched, but held Meredith down while Patrick killed her. This part of their theory was based on the fact that Meredith had sustained so many stab wounds, but no defensive wounds. From there, authorities believed that Patrick, Amanda, and Raffaele staged the break-in. However, the day after she signed the false confession, Amanda realized what had happened and recanted it. But Patrick was already in custody, and they had arrested him before even confirming his alibi, because it turns out he had a rock-solid alibi with multiple witnesses placing him at the bar the night of the murder. However, Amanda and Raffaele remained in custody. And while all of this was happening, Meredith's autopsy results confirmed that she had been assaulted. With that confirmation in hand, authorities wasted no time sharing their theory about an orgy gone wrong with the press. The story gained even more traction when investigators announced that they had found Raffaele's DNA on Meredith's bra, and that they also found a knife in Raffaele's apartment that had Amanda's DNA on the handle and Meredith's DNA on the knife. From there, the allegations became even more over the top, and that was largely thanks to the lead prosecutor on the case, Giuliano Mignini, who was currently under investigation himself for corruption. Many of you may already be familiar with a serial killer referred to as the Monster of Florence, who targeted couples near the city of Florence from the late 60s to the mid-80s. This case is still unsolved, and Mignini had also worked on it. He tried to revive the investigation at the start of the 2000s. Based on virtually no evidence, he concocted an elaborate theory that rather than the murders being the work of one serial killer, they were actually carried out by a satanic cult that was killing women and harvesting their body parts. He came up with a whole conspiracy involving 20 different people, some of whom were government officials. There was really nothing to back up Mignini's theories, so he was rightfully torn apart in the media. This upset him enough that he decided the journalists criticizing him were actually in on the conspiracy. He then opened investigations into these journalists, which involved unauthorized wiretaps. Mignini landed in hot water for this, and the investigation into his actions began in 2006, about a year before Meredith Kercher was killed. He was still under investigation while he headed up Meredith's case. Considering Mignini's past, many people weren't surprised when a media circus surrounding her case ensued. His claims in this case were not far off from his other conspiracies. He told a court that the murder was premeditated and was in addition a rite celebrated on the occasion of the night of Halloween, a sexual and sacrificial rite that in the intention of the organizers should have occurred 24 hours earlier on Halloween itself, but on account of a dinner at the House of Horrors organized by Meredith and Amanda's Italian flatmates, it was postponed for one day. And in their closing arguments, they said she had the look of a, quote, she-devil. In the time since, journalists who reported on the story have admitted that they were not only under tight deadlines, but in heated competition with other tabloids to publish all of the juicy details first, which meant they didn't always thoroughly fact-check the things authorities were telling them. And unfortunately, the notion of seeking justice for Meredith was quickly overshadowed by tabloids eager to villainize Amanda. They started calling her Foxy Knoxy, a nickname Amanda had used on her own MySpace page, to heighten the sexualized image of her. However, they failed to mention that the nickname had been given to her back in her hometown of Seattle in reference to her, quote, foxiness on the soccer field. It had nothing to do with sex. At least it wasn't supposed to. But now Amanda couldn't escape it. Not even when authorities made a crucial discovery that should have proved her innocence. On November 19, 2007, almost 3 weeks since the murder of Meredith Kercher, authorities received a match for some fingerprints found at the crime scene. It belonged to 20-year-old Rudy Guede. Rudy lived in the area and had a record of being accused of committing burglaries. Authorities quickly discovered that the way Meredith's room had been broken into also matched Rudy's alleged MO. On top of the fingerprints, his DNA was discovered on her vaginal swab. They found his DNA on her purse. The bloody handprint at the scene was confirmed to be his. His DNA was on her bra, on the toilet paper, and the feces in the toilet was confirmed to be his. He was placed in the room the night of her murder and had fled to Germany after the murder. That same day, Patrick was officially cleared after multiple people confirmed his alibi. But investigators maintained their theory about an orgy that had turned deadly. They simply replaced Patrick's role in the story as the actual killer with Rudy. While in custody, Rudy admitted to going on a date with Meredith the night she was killed. In a chat with his friend, he initially said that Amanda was not there that night. But his story eventually changed, and he claimed he saw the silhouette of Amanda and an unknown man killed her while he was in the bathroom. He also said him and Meredith had consensual sex, but that he did not kill her. Although before his DNA was found inside of her, he had claimed that they did not have sex because they didn't have condoms. Almost 1 year later, on July 11, 2008, Rudy, Amanda, and Raffaele were all charged with murder. Amanda was also charged with slander for implicating Patrick Lumumba in her initial forced confession, even though she'd recanted it. They all pled not guilty, and from there, Rudy requested an expedited trial. On October 28, 2008, he was sentenced to 30 years for assault and murder, which was eventually appealed down to 16 years. I wonder if him changing his story and testifying against Amanda and Raffaele may have had something to do with that. Finally, on January 16, 2009, after being held behind bars for over 2 years, Amanda and Raffaele entered the courtroom as co-defendants. During the trial, the prosecution added even more shocking new details to their alleged story. They said that Amanda and Raffaele had helped Rudy Meredith, that Amanda had instructed Raffaele to hold Meredith down and stab her, and that when it came time to deliver the final fatal blow, Amanda was the one who dealt it. When it came time for the judges presiding over the case to decide whether they agreed with this version of events, they did. On December 4, 2009, Amanda and Raffaele were found guilty of murder. Amanda was sentenced to 26 years in prison, and Raffaele was sentenced to 25. When the verdicts and sentencing were announced, Meredith's family was relieved. They believed that justice had been served. However, everything changed a year later when the lead prosecutor, Giuliano Mignini, was found guilty of corruption for his mishandling of the Monster of Florence investigation. Mignini's guilty verdict proved to be a huge factor in Amanda and Raffaele's appeals process. On top of that, further investigation led to a court ruling that the DNA evidence used against Amanda and Raffaele was inadmissible because of cross-contamination and mishandling of the evidence. In the videos, you can see officers using dirty gloves while handling things, and they also didn't wear masks, caps, or properly separate each piece of evidence. All these things being considered, on October 3rd of 2011, Amanda and Raffaele were acquitted and released from prison. But their fight still wasn't over, because the prosecution filed to overturn their acquittals, and the Italian Supreme Court sided with them in March 2013. A retrial kicked off in September of that year. Although this time, Amanda was already back in the U.S. and she did not have to be present for this trial. Even though the DNA evidence from the first trial had been largely disproven, the prosecution basically made the same argument as before. And on January 30th, after 11 and a half hours of deliberations, Amanda and Raffaele were convicted for a second time, and the judge tacked on 2.5 years to Knox's sentence. But they do not go back to jail. Raffaele is ordered to surrender his passport, and Amanda was allowed to stay in the States while it was sent to the highest court. And on March 27th, Italy's highest court overturned the convictions of Amanda and Raffaele, noting the lack of biological traces belonging to them at the crime scene and on Meredith Kercher's body. However, Guede's DNA was found in the room and on Meredith's body. The court concluded that the prosecution's case relied on unreliable forensic evidence, and the DNA evidence only pointed to Rudy Guede's guilt. That wasn't all. The court also blamed the bungled investigation on the media circus that had ensued. They said that the sensationalized reporting caused investigators to place blame without thoroughly assessing the facts. On March 27, 2015, 28-year-old Amanda and 31-year-old Raffaele were officially exonerated in the murder of Meredith Kercher. But Amanda's legal troubles weren't over yet, because the slander case against her former boss was not overturned. Years later, in 2019, Amanda was awarded 18,400 euros in damages due to the fact that the Italian police had not given her a lawyer or a translator during the initial interrogation. At the same time, the courts upheld the slander conviction against her, and her final appeal against it was struck down in January of 2025. In Italy, slander is considered a criminal offense, and she was sentenced to jail. However, they considered her time spent in jail as time served. In 2025, a series that Amanda Knox and Monica Lewinsky worked on called The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox was also released. However, the Kercher family felt that it was pointless and insensitive. Meredith's parents both passed in 2020, so now whenever the press comes calling, it's her siblings who have to answer. They've accused Amanda of trying to make money off of the tragedy, and they don't seem to be interested in speaking with her. Amanda says that she understands and respects their wishes, but does think it could be healing to talk. Over the years, Amanda has worked hard to find closure on what happened. She's now married with 2 kids and has cultivated a successful career as a journalist and a victim advocate. At the same time, Amanda has talked about how it often feels like people won't let her move on, because anytime she accomplishes something, tabloids announce that she hit a milestone that Meredith never will. This even pervaded the birth of her first daughter. Amanda said that as soon as she and her husband announced they were having a baby, they received cruel messages from people. At the same time, others who were involved in the case have been finding ways to keep it in the headlines, namely Giuliano Mignini. Mignini is now retired, but just recently on November 4th, 2025, announced that he'd received an anonymous tip about a Bulgarian woman who was involved in Meredith's killing. He brought the tip to authorities who are now apparently searching for that woman. Before researching for this episode, I had never actually done a deep dive on this case or Amanda Knox, but as I was looking at the story, I kept on finding a lot of parallels between Amanda Knox and Karen Read and how their cases were handled. Because, in my opinion, the evidence in both cases proves their innocence. To believe that Amanda was guilty of killing Meredith, you have to believe that she was able to scrub all of her DNA from the room, the scene, from the body, or anything having to do with it, except the knife, which was in her boyfriend's apartment that she probably cooked at multiple times. You have to believe she scrubbed all of her DNA, yet perfectly preserved the DNA from Rudy Guede. To believe Karen Read is guilty, you have to believe that she hit John O'Keefe with her car, 6,000-pound car, going 24 miles per hour, backed up 84 feet, and hit him and killed him, but he didn't have a single bruise under his neck. He didn't have a single broken bone. He didn't have a single torn ligament. He just had a few scratches that conveniently looked a lot like dog bites or scratches. But what got these women was that they didn't grieve properly. Their guilt was that they didn't grieve properly. They didn't react properly to the trauma. And although I do see these stories and I'm like, yeah, it is a little weird to act that way, we never know how we're actually going to act when trauma comes. So we want to all believe we're going to be the perfect victim. But that's why it is so important in cases like these to actually look at the evidence. The sad thing about both of these cases is that the media attention and frenzy on these two women took away from the true victims in both of these cases, Meredith Kercher and John O'Keefe. The media attention also let one of the men, Rudy Guede, slip under the radar. Even though he was convicted, he was let out early on good behavior. But in November, he was brought back into court. That said, November of this year brought other crucial updates, this time about the man who was actually found guilty of murdering Meredith, Rudy Guede. Rudy was released from prison in November of 2021 and was let out early on good behavior, and he got a job in a library. He had also started dating someone while he was in prison, but they broke up in 2023, and she accused him of beating and raping her. Rudy's trial for those charges began November 4th, 2025. So far, no details about that trial have been released, but we'll be following along to see what might come to light. For now, Rudy's continued legal troubles serve as a stark reminder of the woman whose tragic end set this whole story in motion. With the case back in the headlines, the Kercher family lawyer said that they want people to remember Meredith. He said, quote, "We remember once again Meredith's lovely smile and her happiness at arriving in a country where she should have been studying history, art, and beauty, and where instead she met her end." And as always, we'll keep you up to date on any new developments. What did you think of tonight's case? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments. See you next time. If you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel at Crime House Daily and follow us on social media at Crime House 24/7 for real-time updates, because the pursuit of justice never stops.